During my childhood, my family moved around quite a bit. We had lived in multiple states across the country. For the most part, I don't really remember a whole lot of my childhood during that time. Just the inside of a car and a few birthdays here and there. But overall, those memories are just a distant blur in my mind. That being said, there was one house we lived in for only 6 months. Those 6 months have continuously played on loop in my mind for the last 20 years. When we first pulled up to the house, I knew right away that this one was different. The other houses we have lived in the past were much more modern. This house was certainly dated. It reminded me of one of those old plantation-style houses that we had read about in school. The large windows set on the front of the house almost resembled eyes that stared at our car as we approached. Stepping out of the car and onto the driveway, I couldn't help but stare with apprehension at our new home. My mother quickly shoved a couple light boxes into my tiny hands and told me to follow her inside. I did so, albeit a little slower than her. I wasn't so sure what was causing this trepidation, as I had already moved a few times before. All of the other places hadn't given me pause, much like this place. Stepping inside, something immediately felt off, like I was entering someone else's home that I wasn't supposed to. Despite it being utterly empty, there was a kind of air to the place, like that of someone currently living there. That feeling put me on edge as my mother led me throughout the house, showing me the rooms. The house itself, for the most part, appeared normal, but I still couldn't shake that ominous feeling. My mother then led me upstairs to the second floor where my bedroom was. My bed and dresser had already been placed in the room against the 2 vacant walls. A lone window sat across from the door that overlooked the backyard. To my left was another door, which led to my closet. My mother left me to finish unpacking downstairs while I just stood there unsure about my surroundings. I walked over to my closet and hesitantly opened it. Taking a peek inside, I saw that it was just an empty closet. I shut the door and began to unpack some of my things. Eventually, we finished unpacking for the day and spent our first night in that house. While that strange feeling I had earlier in the day persisted throughout the night, I was able to sleep through it. The first major incident occurred about a week after we had moved in. It happened a few hours after I had gone to bed. A familiar sound filled my ears, and since I had been uneasy from the moment I first stepped foot in that house, I instantly woke up. The sound I had heard was the sound of a door opening. Trying to remain as still as possible, I cracked open a single eye and glanced around. I first looked to my bedroom door to see if my parents were checking on me. When I saw it was still closed, I glanced over towards my closet. My breathing stopped. My single cracked eye opened wider. There were 2 eyes, peeking at me from behind the slightly open door. Whatever it was just staring at me. Its head was nearly horizontal and just the top half was sticking out from inside the door. We both stared at each other for nearly an hour. Then, slowly, the head retreated back into my closet, and the door clicked shut. I don't remember how much time passed before my body drifted back off to sleep. When I woke up, I just stared at my closet for a few moments. The light from the sun outside was already beginning to fill my room. I got up from my bed and walked over to the closet itself. I reached out a hand towards the knob, but just before I could open the door, my mother opened my bedroom door, causing me to jump back. She told me breakfast was ready and to come downstairs. I nodded to her and gave one passing glance back towards my closet door. I thought that I just simply had a nightmare. That the strangeness of this new house caused me to visualize something scary. 2 months passed by, and while I remember those days clearly, as every day in that house was unsettling, nothing major happened during that time. That face hadn't returned, and I truly started to believe that it was all in my head. About halfway through the 3rd month, however, it came back. One night, I was lying in bed unable to sleep as I stared out of my window at the clouds drifting across the night sky. I was letting my mind wander off when I was suddenly grounded back into reality by that familiar, yet chilling, sound. In one swift motion, my eyes darted from the window to my closet and I nearly screamed. Whatever it wasn't simply peeking from behind the door this time. It was standing in full view, like a shadow pressed against the wall. Despite its dark appearance, I could still see its wide eyes, staring at me like a curious animal. Those curious eyes set in that humanoid shape made me even more nervous. After a few minutes, I thought that it would leave just like before. But it didn't. I shut my eyes tightly, hoping that when I reopened them, it would be gone. I waited a few more minutes, then cracked open an eye. Those two blank eyes were a few inches away from me, staring directly at me. I screamed louder than I ever had before. A few seconds later, my parents came bursting into my room to check on me, and that thing was nowhere to be found. My parents asked me what was wrong, and I told them that I thought I saw something in my closet. My father mentioned something about being a little too old to believe in monsters, but my mother just hushed him. She opened the door and looked inside. Of course, there was nothing in there except some clothing. She assured me that it was just a bad dream and that I should try to get back to sleep. Though, how could I, after experiencing that? I laid awake all night, keeping a very close eye on my door. The months that followed were just as unnerving. Occasionally, I'd hear that door crack open and see those eyes staring at me. Every time that happened, I'd scream for my parents. They'd come to my aid, though I could tell it was causing them a lot of stress. Then, about a month before we moved out of that house, something happened. I was lying in bed as usual, and a little after midnight, I felt my eyelids become heavy. I thought I heard a noise coming from the closet, and when I opened my eyes once more, I saw nothing out of the ordinary. My eyelids shut and I drifted off to sleep, telling myself that it was all in my head. The feeling of warm air against my face stirred me from my slumber. I tiredly opened my eyes and saw it. It was hovering directly over me. I instinctively inhaled a breath to scream, and when I did, this thing grabbed my face with its hand, covering my mouth entirely. The pressure it was placing on my face was immense. I could feel tears building in my eyes as my muffled screams failed to travel. Its cold, empty eyes just stared at me, then began to look over to its right. I followed its line of sight with my own panicked gaze and saw it holding up its other hand. Fingers like black knives shifted in the air next to me. It rested its hand on me and slowly began to rake its sharpened fingers down my chest. A searing hot pain shot throughout my entire body. I struggled and flailed wildly at the creature. I could feel myself unable to breathe and thought that I would pass out at any moment. I did the only thing I could think of in that moment, and I began to slam my hand into the wall next to me, over and over again, as hard as I could. Eventually, my bedroom door opened and my parents entered. When they did, the thing above me vanished and I was left gasping and crying. My mother was horrified when she saw me, as there were multiple cuts running down from my chest. She told my dad to call the police, which he promptly did. When the police arrived, I was questioned, and I was honest with them. I told them that a monster had attacked me. They searched my room and the entire house but found no one inside. The police had little to go on, especially after hearing my side of the story. None of them even thought to entertain the idea that I might have been telling the truth. After coming up empty-handed, my mother thought it best to move us into a new house. Since then, I have relied heavily on medications and therapy to help me manage my anxiety. I've had the same therapist for the last 10 years, and even though I feel like I haven't made any progress, every session does make me feel a little bit better. I still manage to lead a relatively normal life. I finished high school and went on to college. I'd gotten a job and even managed to get my own apartment. I still have pretty rough nightmares every so often. Like I said before, those 6 months in that house are like a morbid film playing endlessly in my mind. My therapist wanted me to try a different exercise this time, and have me write about my experience to visualize my problem and expel it, in a sense, onto the paper. So that's what I'm doing right now, typing this out. I've been trying to focus on how to finish this story, but I don't think I'll be able to, because I just heard my closet door creak open behind me, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be saved this time.